Then we have the net metering regulations that is also going to be reviewed. And then we've got an integrated energy plan that is also, being developed. And then there's also a third-party access code electricity regulation that is also being formulated. So the acts that govern the energy sector, just moving off from those policies that I just highlighted, there's the Electricity Act of 2002, which makes, which actually enabled independent power producers to start operating in the market. So in other words, for you to generate electricity, you needed to be licensed, and therefore there is this act under the Electricity Act, which allows you to be able to set up. And obviously there are, the policies that govern that as well. Then there's a Rural Electrification Fund Act, which enables the rapid and equitable, electrification of our rural areas. Then there's the Energy Regulatory Authority Act of 2019, which established Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority and sets the requirements and process of regulating the energy licensing. And I highlighted earlier on the Net Metering Act. It's there as well. This one allows you to generate power on your roof and export that power, excess power that you might have to the grid. And there is obviously the regulations that govern how you can do that. So again, there's abundance of rooftops that we've got in this country that we can use to actually generate power as well. Then on the renewable energy side, we have over some 104 IPPs that have been licensed, who have capacity to generate about 2,456 megawatts, but only about 5.6% of that is actually operational at this stage. So what we are saying is there is opportunities in that regards of independent power producers. So going back to where we stand as a country, we've got an installed capacity of 2,342. And then it used to be 55% thermal and 45% hydro. So, and the independent power producers is just a significant percentage of the mix as it stands. So our power generation is dominated from the hydro side and the coal side. Hence, those policies that I've mentioned to encourage us to move towards the adoption of renewable energy. So I don't know whether I can go into the opportunities that are there for people to take advantage of. You are muted there, Reneko.
I was saying, I think you can briefly touch on them if you don't mind, because having highlighted all the policies that exist, my first question in my mind while you were speaking was, is it difficult to get a license? What does it take to become an independent power producer? So maybe if you could just highlight in summary some of the opportunities without going into too much detail, then we'll allow the questions to lead you to maybe go deeper.
Okay, right. It's not difficult to get a license, or maybe let me just clarify. For projects that are below 100 kilowatts, you don't need a license. And that threshold has been relaxed where it comes to power generation for own consumption. In other words, if I have a plant at my factory and I want to generate power for my own use, that limitation has been, the requirements are kind of like light-handed, right? To encourage many people to generate power using own resources, which helps the country in savings, import, currency to import power. You can go as far as you can, even much as 1 megawatts or 20, or 5 megawatts for own consumption, without going through the rigorous processes of, you still need to be licensed, of course, but the process is easy. Then on the other side, where we are talking independent power producers, we are saying somebody is going to be feeding the grid.
Sorry, someone has the microphone on. If you don't mind just switching off your mic. I'm not sure who's just joined. Please, could everybody just switch off their mic if they're not speaking? Thank you. Mr. Nyakusendwa, you may continue.
Okay, so those that then want to export the power or generate power directly to send to the grid, that's really obviously where you then go through the process of, making sure that you comply with the full regulations as independent. Yeah. There is that opportunity there. Our national electrification access rate is around 53%. That gives you also an indication of how much the power deficit that we've got as a country. And that rate is an average urban and the rural. And the rural is normally, is lower than that. And the bulk of our people spend in the rural areas. So we need to look at that. The Rural Electrification Fund cannot meet the demand for rural electrification, right? Because the funding that they get 6% from our national electricity bills, and that's not enough to be able to meet that rural electrification. So the cost of solar, the cost of wind, the cost of battery storage has gone down, right? Now we have decentralized renewable energy systems that are easy to deploy, and that can now come in and driven by the private sector to complement what government is doing to be able then to meet those deficits that we are talking about. You must also bear in that about 70%, of our total energy supply is actually biomass. Being driven by people who use firewood to cook. So those are areas that we also need to look at. Then, of course, we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which, speak to some of the measures that we have to obviously try and reduce the dependence on fossil fuels, dependence on coal-fired plants, and then have efficient cook stoves, electric vehicles, roof solar solutions. Do also mindset management, try and reduce the consumption side on the demand side. So we can look at the issue. If you look at agriculture, we can look at the issue of solar water pumping, irrigation, cooling, post-harvest management. And then on the heating side, we can look at the issue of solar, thermal issues, so that we can, cut down on that electricity. But the issue that I think we need to be very clear about is the issues to do with quality standards, affordability, and after. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyakusendwa. That was quite a holistic summary. I think we have the picture now, right? Both for commercial use and personal use, how Zimbabwe is working with renewable energy and the areas we still need to improve on, and our high dependency on biomass still, which is something that globally is being fought hard, that we reduce that consumption. So now we're going to move on to solar energy in particular. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Devonish, I'm going to hand over to you to speak to us about solar in particular, right? We talk of our Sunshine City generating about 7.5 hours of sunshine per day. So we know our high potential as Zimbabwe to generate so much solar energy. So where are we losing it? Where are we going wrong? Mr. Devonish, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ruveneka. I think I'd just like to paint a little bit of a picture about where solar fits in to the total grid supply. First of all, the problem with solar is that it only works when the sun is shining. And likewise, wind power only works when the wind is blowing. So we need what we call a battery, which in effect is the grid itself. And the most important battery we have in our country is Lake Kariba, with the generating power there. I know it's below at the moment, but we have several other water bodies where large amounts of electricity can be generated. And the Batoka Gorge is obviously something exciting for our country. We also have massive coal reserves, and I know the rest of the world is talking to us about not using our coal reserves while they busily generate times more carbon than we do. So we also have those new power stations coming on board. What that means is you've got your base load coming from hydro and from coal. And then you have the solar power coming in. Solar is expensive to install and almost free to run. Generators are cheap to buy and very expensive to run. So solar power is a wonderful option if you have cash to buy the equipment, or if you can borrow money cheaply to buy the equipment. This country, it's amazingly good. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'm looking forward to listening to grid, and most importantly, the sun shines during the day when most businesses and factories are working, and that way we can supply it. I think those are my main points. I think we need to recognize that solar is very important, but it is not a silver bullet. It is not going to solve the country's requirements, but it can certainly contribute significantly at the right times of day.
Thank you for that. And just as you know, we've been undergoing our load shedding in the country, and those who have solar can attest that now that it's the rain season, there's nothing more frustrating than having had no electricity from ZESA all day, and then now your solar hasn't charged because it's been overcast all day. So it is true that you're saying it's not the most sustainable or reliable form of energy if the sun is not shining in particular. And I think now we can get into our other panelists, and I'd like us to now look at some of the areas.
Can I just come in again quickly?
Yes, sure.
I think something that I should have mentioned is storage, batteries. When we've been in the solar game for 6 years, and when we started, just about everything was lead acid batteries, which had a short lifespan. And there were problems with it. Now I've got lithium-ion batteries, and as you know, Zimbabwe is one of the world's key sources of lithium. But battery technology is really taking off now. There's all sorts of stuff happening in battery which allows you to store, which again makes solar more and more viable, because when the sun is shining, you can store that energy. So I think that's another big plus that needs to be considered. I know there's quite a lot of work going on in this country and in South Africa. They're talking about supercapacitors, which are also an additional improvement on batteries. So I think we need to consider.
So just a quick one for you there, Chairman. What is better, lead or lithium?
Lithium-ion batteries without a supercapacitor. But where you have improvement in panels over the last, that's kind of total now. There's huge investment going into development of batteries. So it's lithium-ion, supercapacitor just now. You know, people like Elon Musk are just, you know, breaking barriers all the time on that.
All the time. And letting Trump back on Twitter. So now looking at what you just said, just a quick one as well, just while you're still in solar, there's conversations, of course, and criticism around the competition that there is in the Zim market in terms of supply of solar, particularly those that are supplying to households. You know, there's the markets from the east who are literally saturating the market and the game. How do you then stop households from, you know, buying these sort of cheaper solutions of so invest in, but cheap to run, but everyone wants cheap and cheap. So sometimes they end up buying these panels from these Eastern countries and they just don't last. So for domestic use, I'm sure people can, you know, choose and, you know, be touch and go. For use on a grill, how do we quality control this?
Yeah, anyone who's in the anyone in the solar game knows that you have, certainly in the panel game, you have what we call top tier, first tier panels, and those are easily identifiable. I think, and by the way, virtually all solar panel products are manufactured in China. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with China. You've got proper levels of quality. But if you're buying solar or you're buying kit to be installed at your home, you've got to make sure. And, you know, the obvious thing is go to a reputable supplier. And I think Mr. Nakasendwa will probably have some input on that. And, you know, I'm not as well aware of the association as I should be, but I guess we should all be able to say we're part of the association, and you can only join that association if you are selling the right quality of kit and you have the right installers.
Sure. Thank you for that. Just for that clarity, it is important because we're all victims of this sometimes, you know, so it's good to hear that. So now we move on to our panelists. I'll start with Mr. Gwatidzo. Given the experience you have as an entrepreneur and also working in the industry with solar and Unigas, let's look at what your perspective is. The introductions we've heard in the various speeches now so far from our panelists, submissions, where would you come in now to talk about Zimbabwe and our positioning with renewable energy as a whole?
Thanks very much, Renewable. I think as Valsa in SolarWise, we are privileged to actually play in both areas for the CNI and also at the grid level. So I'll comment on both, which is I think what Mr. Alexander mentioned earlier. On the CNI, which is the commercial and industrial, just to echo what Patrick Devney said in terms of the quality of products and in terms of tier one products that we actually have very good products in the market currently. They will come in slightly more expensive prices, but you'll be guaranteed of reliability, especially in terms of lithium and batteries that he did mention. We've got now in the marketplace 10-year warranties on batteries, and the batteries are getting much more durable, which means I think in terms of storage, that equation is getting sorted out. So just to maybe comment a bit more on that, I'm aware of it's a bit of a challenge. If you look at the CNIs, we've got some significant companies actually going off grid. I know, for instance, currently you've got Pepsi going off grid, flats going off grid, which means ultimately once on a company basis, these companies go off grid, it is more the other guys who are still on the grid. So my perspective is, besides looking at it from a grid level, we look at it from the decentralized solar implementation level, where companies that can afford to actually go off grid, maybe actually do that, so that they leave whatever is being generated on the grid to everyone else. Because what's currently happening, I think, which is I think speaking to Peter's point, solar is very difficult, I think, on the grid due to, and I think it's also quite difficult to have storage at grid level. But at corporate and industrial level, quite a few of the companies can be able to afford the prices of them on batteries become quite across the board. I think on all levels, grid high, the challenge is honestly the funding aspect, which I think is fortuitous that we sit in its first capital year. It's really, really expensive to implement. I think most people will be able to get into arrangements where as companies they actually manage the storage and generation as long as it's funding that is reasonable in terms of time.
I think on the storage, I think we are getting a lot more educated on this, because I think that's one thing that needs to sort of be a solution. We have highlighted some of the challenges, and Ms. Nyakusetu painted a picture on the challenges. Want to look in this conversation and have hopefully leave with solution, way forward regarding how we can all maximize, all as well as in our homes, as well as, like you said, like commercial and industrial. I'll engineer Masiazi now and talk about all the importing that Zimbabwe does of our electricity at the moment, that we're not managing to maximize on our capacity. I'm hoping that you can speak as well, like Mr. Nyakusetu did, on a more holistic scale regarding our position in the country. When ZESA is going through this load shedding, we're sitting there, all we can say is, where are the engineers? What's going on? And we blame so many elements that we don't fully understand. So as an engineer, maybe you can tell us a little bit about our capacity and this relationship we have with our neighboring countries and how much we have to import, because ultimately that's what we need to slow down, right? So over to you, engineer.
Thank you, Reneko. With regards to our capacity, you find that we are below capacity as a country in general, and that we are making in terms of the engine to try and close that gap. But I see that as a long journey. It's not something that's going to happen, always. And there are several aspects we need to also consider as we go closing particular gap. In terms of, we are importing this. I think historically we know to actually be importing a capacity of around 20 megawatts. And mostly this would be like from your ESCOM, which is in South Africa, and your HCB, which is in Mozambique. And you find that to also keep, the entities viable, that is our energy production, entities viable, you find that we've also been exporting, through a commercial agreement. I think the one that comes to mind is NamPower for Namibia. We've exported to them as a way of also getting revenue creation. So it's an aspect of trying to find a balance as well as answering to the demands that are within the country. But, when you look at the value chain of renewable energy, a lot of the focus in the past has been from the point of where we say receiving the electricity, its distribution across, various households into the rural areas within our peri-urban to urban environments as well. And then, what happens after that? There hasn't been significant focus on what happens before. So when you look at our solar landscape, because I'm just going to specifically zero in on solar, when you look specifically on that, you find more often than not, we are buying our solar products from outside, and then we redistribute, we resell those particular solar products. And these are the ones which then get installed in our various, homesteads. Also with grid projects that are being, we institutions have also been looking at another part of the value chain that lends to close the gap in terms of our solar energy. If you look at manufacturing, there are several challenges which come to mind. Is the aspect of the cost that is associated with actually pursuing that. And of course, there are various provisions under our policies, like the policy in terms of our network maintenance. You find that there are several interventions placed to actually help from our local manufacturers. But most of these have a timeline that's associated with them, a patient from the how soon to have that product, because the consumer wants that product immediately. And that the way we can probably assist in terms of ensuring that it gets there quickly is coming up to speed from the manufacturing entity, tying in with the standards that are required. Of course, also promoting market acceptance, with regards to the new products that can. And then, under the policy as well, there are the tax incentives and finance incentives that have also been mentioned. I think will help go a long way in terms of promoting, the manufacturing R&D, because this is where the engineers normally play a significant role with regards to that. And of course, as we are going on that journey, the aspect of even weaving in sustainability, because sustainability aspects of how do we store the energy that is that in its R&D efforts that are focused towards that, but that also needs funding. So it's a constant loop. We continuously try to close the gap. It's a case of just trying to achieve the balance and ensuring that at the end of the day, used products do get the acceptance that they need and can also installation with the right way. And it's a slow process. Not everyone, some individuals would declare to install, but after a year or two, sometimes the installation adequate but the manner in which it was installed. So education and skill when being done.
And with Zimbabwe relying 70% on agriculture and so much of it going to our GDP, I think this is so important to hear from you now, Ms. Mashumba, about farming, the farming sector and renewable energy. We can also look at the issues with irrigation, especially for rural farmers. Tell us what your views are on the uptake of renewable energy in the farming sector.
Thank you very much, Ruveneko, for that introduction. And I would also like to thank the First Capital Bank for inviting me onto this panel and, showing us that the voice of farmers is very important. So that's appreciated. All of us here might have heard a statement that Zimbabwe used to be the basket of Southern Africa. And some debated that, but for sure, we did produce more than we produce today. And when we look at why are we not producing, there are many factors. And one of them is one of the factors of production being energy. We don't have enough energy as farmers to produce for the growing population in Zimbabwe. Most farmers rely on electricity, the ones that have access to electricity to farm. This is for the irrigation, primary and secondary production, as well as solar energy for those who can afford to put solar energy. But that's the uptake so far for solar energy or renewable energy is very low. Most farmers who don't have electricity or who have electricity, but due to the excessive power cuts, use generators, and diesel again is very expensive. Has the price of diesel we've seen increase. And when we cost agriculture, most people think agriculture has high margins, but actually agriculture has low margins. So when we look at increase in diesel costs, it really affects the cost of food. And then we look at availability of electricity. And then we now look at what other sources of energy can people rely on. And then there is renewable energy sources that farmers can invest in. But then we look at the cost of capital, which is a real topic that we discuss today. What is the cost of capital in Zimbabwe? The cost of capital in Zimbabwe is higher than a lot of other countries globally. We look at the risk factors that the banks talk about, that in Zimbabwe, there is more high risk. And then we look at the interest rates. When your farm is given an interest rate of about 45%, and yet our cost of food is maybe our margins are only like 10%, that becomes a huge problem. And a topic that we cannot ignore is the importance of the environment. Climate is continuously becoming more and more difficult for farmers to farm. This year, we had 2 weeks of good rains, and now we are in our dry spell. During that dry spell, farmers need to irrigate their crops. And if they don't irrigate, what will happen is most of the crops will go to permanent wilting. And when we don't have enough food, we have to import. The vicious cycle. And some of these things can really be solved by us ensuring that there is enough power for farmers to be able to produce. So when we produce, we don't have to import and we don't have to use our valuable forex to import food. So, and then we also find a lot of farmers now chopping firewood and in order to cure their tobacco or for other practices that they have to do, that they have resorted to using firewood. And all this is negative when we look at the environment in itself. And I had a conversation the other day with a bank for my community. You'll find that the measures we look at in Zimbabwe are very different internationally, even for funding. We don't consider how much funding is being given to women, to youth, even for the environment, and what sort of, if we fund this organization, what about the environmental impact that the organization also contributes? So some of the things which are very different in Zimbabwe when we compare internationally. So today, we'll have some recommendations, or at least I have an opportunity to speak on this panel in terms of looking at funding and what Zimbabwe would look like if we're considering the fact that we need to produce more food. This is by no doubt important. Humans would not exist if we don't have food. And if we do not produce food, we're going to have to import that food. If we do not have foreign currency to import the food, we're going to see people being hungrier and hungrier and the poorer getting poorer. So we really need to be serious as a country and look at agriculture and how can we support it better than how we're supporting today. And some of the factors that we need to consider is, okay, for funding, how can we better fund? We need to look at where do farmers get money? What is the frequency rate? If loans are once, does it make sense for farmers? It doesn't. The default rate is going to be high because most farmers will not be able to pay within 3 months. We need to look at how can we then maybe ask farmers to produce proposals where they are able to that this is my off-taker, and then take some of the money from the off-taker. This is some of the value financing the banks can look at. It's no doubt that I agree with everybody on this panel that we need more energy than we have currently. And we keep on having these conversations year in, year out. Nothing seems to be happening. And this is like really urgent for us to really ensure that we are supporting our agriculture sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mashumba. You sounded like Greta Thunberg at the end there, saying nothing is happening. We're talking too much, but not coming. I think that you've definitely touched on some key points, and I'm just proud to highlight that Ms. Mashumba, the former Shizzy girl, like myself, you know, so you can see how diverse we are and how amazing she's doing in the farming sector. So thank you for that. And you know what? You've brought in a subject that I think is already the introduction to Mr. Shokunze, who's coming back to speak now, because you talked about the cost of capital. And who better to speak on the cost of capital than First Capital Bank? All right, and also just encourage you, Ms. Shokunze, to start with what she spoke about this trend of 3-month loans and the inability of farmers to pay back and then defaulting. So I think this is definitely something we want to hear from you, the board chair here, so you can say what you want to say. He can give it a stamp of approval right now. Okay, so let's make progress. Mr. Shokunze, over to you.
Thanks, Ruveneko, for attempting to get me into trouble. Right, Ms. Mashumba, you have raised some issues and some concerns that are close to my own commercial heart, if such a thing exists. We as a bank and me as myself totally understand where you're coming from. Access to finance remains difficult. Right? If you are not a blue chip company, if you are not a a business that has a long track record of banking, audited accounts, strong cash flows, it becomes difficult for you to access lines of credit. When we then overlay that on this renewable energy story, whether it be solar or anything else, as has already been highlighted, the cost of capex is high, right? And if the cost of capex is high and the cost of capital to fund that capex is also high, it creates a major problem. And the only way to solution for that problem is then to lengthen tenors, right? Which then ultimately makes it manageable for off-takers of this money, to be able to fund projects over time in a manner which is commercially viable, and ultimately you then are permitted to establish that margin saving. So I think you kind of know where I'm going with this. It's then to say it does not to lend short term for a person who's got potatoes that have to come out next season. They currently have no cash flow right now. The cash flow will come as a bullet at some point in time when the rainy season is over. And at that point, if you're lending short, then all that value is going to go into paying off their batteries and their solar panels. And over and above that, we've also discovered in our own analysis of the agri space that the demands for the type of solar power that are required, in commercial or sub-commercial agriculture are high. The sort of pumps you have to drive for your irrigation require significant wattage. So the capex spend naturally is going to follow. And I do accept, following on from Mr. Evans' comments and Mr. Nyakuse's comments, that there is innovation taking place. The amount of power you can extract from a single solar panel now, I think it's doubled or tripled in the last 3 or 4 years. I remember maybe 10, 15 years ago, you used to get a big 50-watt panel. Now you get a big 450-watt panel. And over and above that, battery technology is also starting to improve. Notwithstanding, while the prices are coming down, and I would say now lately they're coming marginally as opposed to big gaps in decreases. The capital requirement is still expensive in an economy that, for all intents and purposes, still lacks a lot of efficiency. So how are we as the bank trying to solve this problem? quite simply, we are working on a product which will be ready for next year. You can call it a green bond if you like. And it's simply to say that our goal is to raise a significant chunk of money from our pension funds, from our insurance companies, if we can, if there's appetite for it, from our international investors or those that have appetite for Zimbabwean risk. And as a bank, the green economy into renewable energy, into farmers such as yourselves who are trying to generate a reasonable rate of return, but don't want a financing facility that will be overly onerous on your cash flow statement. You want to take money that's not going to break the bank, and therefore our product is designed to cover a 3 to 5 year horizon, and if possible, and depending on the size of the project, we would like to go longer, to 10 to 15 years, because sometimes you find that based on the capex profile of some of these projects, the payoff period can run, into a period that is over 10 years, just because of the sheer scale of what is required. And with time, that will change as innovation improves. The cost element starts to drop. The amount of energy you can produce per solar panel or whatever it is, that starts to improve, and naturally that should all improve the financing profile in terms of the offer. So I think the point is to say, Ms. Mashumba, don't despair. We've got some smart people that are working on developing products that suit the market need across the spectrum, for the small guy as well as for the large commercial operator or the commercial farmer. And hopefully that should contribute into a narrative where we can solve for multiple problems. You can maintain your profits, you can save on your margins, but most importantly, we can create a sustainable future.
Thank you, Mr. Shokunze. Before I respond, Ms. Mashumba, what do you make of that response?
It definitely sounds positive, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Mr. Shokunze. Thank you for that. I think we now need to go back to the rest of the panel. So much has been said. I'm sure some of you are sitting there wanting to on each other, watching your facial expressions as others have been speaking there, and then in some instance pensive looks. So I'll open up to the panel now if there's anybody who would like to say anything regarding the conversations that have been had now, so that we can bring it in, and then of course open it up to our panelists to our viewers who are watching, to ask you your individual questions. So anyone from our panel to say anything at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to come in on the finance and on the interest rates. Our interest rates are a political problem. We are sanctioned, we're excluded, or we excluded ourselves from the Commonwealth, which means that our interest rates are unreasonably high. Prior to COVID, interest rates in the first world Europe were negative. So you could borrow 100 and in a year pay back 99, and in 2 back 98. So if you compare West Germany, Zimbabwe, West Germany could borrow $1 billion to build a highway, and in 10 years' time pay back 900 million. We in Zimbabwe would be, if we are very lucky, paying 12%. We'll call it 10% for round numbers. So we borrow $1 billion to build a highway. In 10 years' time, we $1 billion. It's so critical, and I'm so glad that our government is working on getting readmitted to the Commonwealth. And I see that Cyril Ramaphosa is in the UK, and one of the key items on his agenda is to get sanctions on Zimbabwe lifted. It's a political issue that is one of the issues that keeping our interest rates high is politics. And I think solving that, and that will interest rates. And then as the economy, I know that looking into the future, it's just trying to see some positive stuff.
Thank you, Chairman. You said what I'm thinking, right? No one ever wants to mention politics, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And I do hope that we do get readmitted like most of us, and what it will mean and translate into this economy if we're back in the Commonwealth. So I think this is something that, the interest rates, I don't know if that's you hiding behind that, as the chairman, just to say we can't bring them down because it's a political thing, but I think you are explaining the macro environment in which you have to survive. And I think nobody can contest that really. So let's come to some of the questions. Anyone else from the panel, sorry, before I come to some of the reading from our viewers. Mr. Nyakusendwa, you look like you're bursting to say something. Please go ahead.
No,
Please go ahead.
this is a very huge topic, which actually requires a whole day to talk about. There's so much to talk about, but I want to make comments on access to finance. It's a long overdue, and I applaud First Capital Bank if they are looking to do green bonds. Welcome to the party, because we've been looking for these kind of instruments in the market and to try and de-risk them, because you can't offer a commercial solution to somebody who is in farming. It doesn't work. Somebody who is doing it doesn't work, because you're talking of a 20-year project, 25-year project. It does not work. So what is happening is that on the ground, we just also kind of link in with, we have got so much information as to who is doing what within this terrain. You've got people who have been giving grants to small companies, startups, right, to actually champion renewable energy, projects. I'm one of those people who has a company that offers solutions for irrigation for smallholder farmers. And what normally happens is that company is funded, right, to provide, and we offer, credit to farmers, smallholder farmers, right? And what you did, those are catalyst funding, right, which should be complemented by local financing to make it sustainable forward, and also to scale up and to replicate and to, so we actually financial institutions to actually come to the party and also grow what's being done. The government is also looking at incentives, and so private sector can play their role and run with what to be done. So that was my comment on the issue of access to finance. The other comment is on local manufacturing. I think we need to talk about research and development. Put money into R&D is a major issue before we even start talking about local manufacturing. If you demonstrate the will to actually put money into R&D, then about local manufacturing. Is it local manufacturing or is it local assembly, right? We also need to look at our competencies and our competitiveness. It's not competitive to manufacture solar panels in this country. Everybody knows that, it's cheap in China. Even European companies actually manufacture their products in China. All they do is whether the quality standards are, on point. Then, of course, there's the issue of, awareness, that we just need to make people aware of the quality products on the market, so that they don't go and buy the products which are not, which are not which are substandard. And then lastly, the issue of data is very important. I would like to urge First Capital Bank to also measure how much money have they given to women, how much money have they given to youths, how much money have they put into renewable energy. because that's the kind of information that will influence our development as a country going forward. You'll be shocked where we have put our monies into, because we are saying these are growth-related and developmental-related areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nyakusendwa. I think you have probed some subjects that hadn't yet been discussed, and like you said, this could end up being a whole day conversation because of how broad it is. And I think my first question to you is, what are your interest rates?
You probably find that the interest rates are nowhere near the numbers that are being talked about here. We are talking of the whole purpose of it is to make the product affordable to fishery. So at the end of the day, it's not really about any money from interest, right? It's the issue about affordability of a product to the beneficiary. So we don't look at issues from that perspective that we are lending money to people. We are basically providing a service. We are providing promoting impact that we feel should be in our economy, from gender to youth to to having a decent job, having a decent income, all your SDGs, and making sure that at least the rural populace actually have also quality of life. So at the end of the day, it's not about the issue to do with the return that we get. Thank you.
You haven't answered me with a figure, but you've answered me with words. Okay, we'll take that for today. And anyone with interest, no pun intended, will come and find you and get more detail on that. But I think on the local manufacturing, which was touched on by the engineer, you have also looked at that in a very realistic way to say, are we manufacturing or are we assembling, and do we have the capacity? And that training comes in again. So I think that conversation needs to come in. There's a question that is here from one of our panelists, and the question is, are there subsidies in place for moving to renewable energy? Are there subsidies in place for moving to renewable energy? I'll open that up to anyone on the panel who can take that.
Okay, I can comment on that.
Sure.
Right, solar. There's normally a term that we use to say solar is duty-free, but it basically relates to the issue of panels, right? Which are duty-free. Lithium-ion batteries have also been added to that list, and then some solar home systems have also been added onto that. But other components, right? You are wanting to put up your multiple components that you're bringing in, cables, the issue of inverters, the issue of charge controllers and things. Those are not duty-free. So in lobbying to see if we can get those products to be also to be duty-free, and that goes across the board to whatever renewable energy technologies that you're talking about. I mean, we're talking about biogas the other day. Now you've got new technologies where you can bring in components to build about biogas digesters, but the biogas digesters are not duty-free, the components, right? So there is a lot of work that we need to do as a country to make sure. We're also talking about, it's not only a duty that we should be talking about. We should also be looking at the issue of, if one looks at benefits that would derive from us taking those kind of policies, the employment, the growth, the income that people then earn, it will far outweigh, when you then take all that, it far outweigh what we would have lost as a country. I think on the 2nd of December, we have a VAT impact study that we are launching as well, or that we are actually getting input from stakeholders to see if we can copy that. Then Sorry, then there's,
Sorry, I can't even see whose microphone is on. Sorry there again, Mr. Nyakusendwa.
okay,
I'm not sure who keeps interrupting you.
okay.
Sorry.
So then there's the issue of prescribed asset status. That has been talked about. It's available through the Commissioner of Insurance, or the Commission, yeah, and IPEC. But the challenge is obviously is that it's a it's a protracted process, and we saying it should be made easier. There used to be national project status on solar, on renewable energy projects. That unfortunately has been withdrawn, and we are actually trying to push as much so that those kind of things can come back into the sector as incentives to ensure that the sector grows. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyakusendwa. There's so many questions coming in now from our viewers. And the second question is linked to what you've already answered. They're asking, what are the benefits of using renewable energy for small businesses? So I think in a lot of ways you've touched on that. I think people are listening and they're like, okay, I get into the renewable energy game. Are there any benefits? Are there any incentives for me as a business owner? But I'll come to another question, which will take us to Mr. Devenish, Mr. Chairman. If we could just get a parting shot on this particular question. So another question says, I have a small 2-hectare tobacco farm. What type of solar system do I need?
Right. It's a good question. When we first started solar, we were very excited and we thought we'd be able to help tobacco farmers. But as I said earlier, solar only works when the sun is shining. And the problem with tobacco is that the curing takes place during the rainy season. So we would be very reluctant to install a solar system for a farmer and having believed that he could cure his tobacco with that heat, because he wouldn't. This season he wouldn't have enough energy. I'm also involved with the Tobacco Industry Marketing Board, and we are doing research on gas for curing tobacco. But, to answer his question, if he wanted a small solar system for his farm to do other stuff, plus or minus $5,000 would probably do it. But definitely, it's a long time till we get it to be curing tobacco.
Sure. Thank you for that very practical answer. I hope you answered. Mr. Devenish, with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your contributions to today's conversation. It is important to have your voice. So we do hope that the conclusions today will reach you. If anything that needs to be handled by you and your office, I'm sure it'll be tabled to you, but thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry, if I can just say one more thing.
Please go ahead.
One of the things that bothers us in the solar business is that if you're an independent power producer in Zimbabwe, you get paid in Zimbabwe dollars. Meantime, the cost of your solar installation is in US dollars. So it's an exceptionally risky venture to invest US dollars into solar and get paid in Zim dollars, which is probably a declining source of revenue. And yet, when our utility, and I've already directed this to the young lady from ZESA, when our import solar, they pay US dollar for it. So it would be huge if the energy that IPPs put to the system could be paid for in US dollars.
Thank you again. Thank you for that. I can see smiles here, so I'll allow panelists now to chew on that as you take your leave. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of the seminar. Bye.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, so that's the First Capital Bank Board Chairman, Mr. Patrick Devenish. He has to dash off somewhere, but we continue, and we're going to be able to summarize our conversation with our panelists, and of course with you who's watching from wherever you are. Thank you for tuning into this First Capital Bank webinar, and via LinkedIn, wherever you are watching from, do keep your questions coming. We've got just a few more minutes, so I'll come to the panel now. Anything to add there? Engineer, you've been smiling away, and I'm keen to see what's going on in that mind of yours, given some of the submissions that have been made. Please let us know what you're thinking.
Thank you very much. When we I particularly like the distinguishing between local manufacturing and local assembly. In the solar business right now, it's probably we're looking mostly at local assembly, but in the other forms of renewable, energy space, which is not solar, you also have manufacturing taking place. So hopefully it's a case of looking at it in terms of a broad spectrum. I would like to probably allude to what Mr. Devenish actually said, that solar is not going to solve everything. But if we look at our renewable energy sources collectively, we can actually, find a way of answering to the problem that is there. I just want to make a quick comment. Mostly, probably, I want to address those viewers who probably are up-and-coming entrepreneurs or the individuals who are trying to look, okay, what role can I play within the renewable energy space? And this is where I say you have to, first of all, understand the value chain itself and the areas in which you can play with. The research and development process itself needs players who are actually acting in that. If we're going to make local manufacturing a reality within the renewable energy space, we need really, strong research and developers. When we're looking at the aspects of our distribution, our installation, we need, individuals who play a part to that. You can start a business in that particular area, but at the same time, it's important to do the upskilling. Know the various sectors you can actually approach, know the regulatory who are in place. In this case, you've got Zera, you have your RIA, you have your being an entrepreneur within the space of renewable energy. And then also from a consumer's point of view, it's also important to just have a appreciation of what can be used, how you can contribute. You can also, I'm hoping, I'm not sure if it's been fully implemented, but they should metering, aspects in place where you're saying, I've installed a domestic unit that's generating power for my own use, but if I have excess, I can plow it back into the grid. So these are various opportunities that we can explore together to ensure that at the end of the day, we're playing our individual roles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer. Ms. Mashumba, over to you.
My comment on the currency from the chairman, I think it also now affects even the people who are going to buy the solar. As farmers, we also get paid in local currency for most of our produce that we are producing for the country, like our maize. So if we have to then pay for our solar in foreign currency or in US dollars, we'll then also be looking at lobbying to ensure that farmers are also paid in the currency that they're able to then afford to pay for the solar, because farmers are always last considered in the value chain. And we find that most of the times we take the hit. So we will have to buy all our inputs in including the infrastructure and pay our loans in a currency, yet we earn a different currency. So that really would be a challenge for us. So I was just nodding my head thinking, how far can this go? And would that mean that the whole economy will have to be dollarized for that to work? And how to make both currencies work so that no one takes the hit for that exchange.
Mm-hmm. That exchange will continue to be a conversation. I think everybody understands how that affects, especially for farmers, the time of turnover and when you get payments. So Mr. Guato, you've been awfully quiet. I don't think it's maybe because we can't see your face, but please, if you could, with your closing remarks.
I thank you, Renewable. I think in closing, what I can just emphasize for me, being the solar industry and maybe biased, is the beauty about solar is it's a decentralized solution. So in terms of maybe the agriculture sector, we've got now possibly subsistence farmer, your solar pumping and balls that can significantly increase productivity without necessarily one country. You can have increase, I think, in the growth points as well, which can be self-contained. So what does this save the cost of transmission, maybe, which is a huge cost where electricity power is concerned. So all those things, I think, when you then put them in perspective, including the innovations that everyone has mentioned around the pricing and size of panels and storage as well. You find a solution that can be implemented in a very wide sort of way, where you're starting from the individual or the commercial industrial, and they've got the grid. So if it is applied in such a way, I think it can not be a silver bullet as such, but it can be able to address, I think, most of the concerns that people have in terms of implementation. I'm aware, of course, I think as engineer said that they're under renewable energy solutions in Zimbabwe, but for some reason, solar is taken traction. So what I would want maybe first capture to look at from a business point of view is to say what is the product that you've got for the small subsistence farmer who just wants to increase their productivity, because they have now got a solar pole that can make 2 acres of additional productivity. What do you have for maybe a growth point, a mini solution that you can be able to implement that's good storage, and what activities can then be done by the people within that mini commission to be able to even pay on a pay-as-you-go basis so that you increase productivity on that level. I know the difficult one is obviously to the contribution to the grid, because I think, like everyone has been saying, getting investment for that is really, really very difficult, because that's a huge capital outlay. But for the first two, I'm sure with enough innovation and maybe the parties sitting down together, we can be able to find solutions that can be able to address the individual, the home, and maybe the commercial industrial to different lengths, and maybe make those productive while we're trying to solve the policy framework around trying to get investment into grid-tied solar farms, which I think we're trying to do one, and I can tell you, I think it's not an easy task.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Gwatizo. And Mr. Kusendo?
Thank you, Reneko. Just to say that I think our people in Zimbabwe needs to change their mindset. Not everything that's cheap is good for them. You know, particularly when we come to solar, people are just buying products off the shelf without even knowing whether the product works, and having their products being installed by people without relevant skills. So we need our people to change our mindset and to embrace the issues with quality, products and standards, and also dealing with reputable people, so that at least they don't invest their money. I mean, it's disheartening if you go around and see how many systems are not working in this country that have been installed by people who don't have the skills to do the installation. So you have multiple systems, and it gives the view that, you know, where solar doesn't work. Secondly, we have to look at, when we look at power solutions, we're looking at one solution. You have to look at an solution. So Zimbabwe has lots of generators that have been imported well before we are actually saying you don't actually dispose them off, you actually integrate them in your solar solution that you actually put up, as well as if you are agreed, you have a grid that comes to you, you can have a grid-tied solution as well, so that at least you have a complete solution. If solar is not working, you know, you default back to your grid. Is not working, you default back to your generator. Also, you can also add your batteries. So it's a whole system, and not really to say solar is just about putting a panel on your roof. Then I think let's also demystify this belief that the rural people don't have money and that they don't know what they are also doing. They're very clever people, and they know what they're doing, and they're very business people.
I think we've lost Mr. Nyakusendwa. I think he's frozen there. All right, we'll come back to him if he can hear us. Mr. Nyakusendwa, if you can hear us, have frozen on your screen. Don't worry, you don't look weird. We just need to just maybe move to Mr. Oshokunze and we'll let you rejoin with a different connection. If you can hear us, we'll come back to you. Maybe you can dial in again so that we get your final words. Mr. Oshokunze, over to you.
Thanks. So I think a lot of
like lending time.
I think he's
Okay, I think that was the tail end of his disconnection. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, no, look, lots of positive feedback from the panelists. I think over and above that is necessary action. I think, you know, from my experience in the renewable world, but just in banking generally, money usually connects all pieces of the puzzle. You know, we are about direction, whether it's grid tied, you know, purchasing power agreements that are required. We spoke about manufacturers, assembly, or